So by far the best announcement from the recent Apple event was nothing to do with the new iPads. It's actually regarding the existing iPad 10 because Apple gave it a whopping $100 price cut. And with the introduction of the USB Type-C pencil late last year, Apple's now successfully fixed most of my issues with the iPad 10. So is this a de facto iPad to buy? Well, let's revisit this iPad and discuss that further. Beginning with the design of this iPad, this very much was a huge refresh for the base model because before this, we had a design from 2013. Yes, Apple was recycling the same old iPad Air chassis year after year, but thankfully, with the iPad 10, we got a brand new design. Though if I'm being honest, it's not really new because this in itself is a design from 2018, but either way, it has helped the iPad age well nearly 2 years post its release because it still looks like pretty much every other modern iPad. The icing on the cake though has to be the bold and punchy colors. We need more Apple devices to come in fun colors like these because I've had enough of the pale crap. I mean, how exactly is this blue? Now moving to the display on the iPad 10, this is where some of its shortcomings are a little more apparent. Now the display itself is actually identical to the iPad Air. It's 10.9 inches, a liquid retina panel that has a max brightness of 500 nits, it has True Tone, 264 ppi, and also fingerprint resistant coating. The main omissions, however, are no P3 support, the display itself is not laminated, and also there's no anti-reflective coating. Now I'm assuming out of those omissions, most are probably bothered by the fact the display is not laminated, and I admit, this did suck on all the base iPads. It definitely was something you could pick up on when using it, however with this new design, Apple has done some magic where it's actually not that noticeable on the iPad 10. Now I'm not going to claim you can't completely see the air gap because yes, if you look for it, it's very much there. But I will say I can forget it's there, and it doesn't stick out like a sore thumb like on the iPad 9. So that's awesome, but the omission that personally bothers me is the anti-reflective coating. Now I can understand why the display is not laminated because ultimately it's cheaper to repair and that's essential for parents, giving these to kids because they manage to break everything. But why leave out the anti-reflective coating? Considering brightness isn't very high in the first place, if you're near a place where there's tons of bright light, aka near a window, the display kinda becomes unreadable, not gonna lie. Now putting a screen protector on this does fix things to an extent, but come on Tim, does it really cost Apple that much more to put a simple coating on this iPad? If that was here, I would not have much to complain about display-wise. And yeah, that means I also have zero issues about this being 60Hz. I can look past that, but the fact the display is so reflective sucks. You know what wouldn't suck though? Subscribing to this channel. I would greatly appreciate it and it would bring you the latest about Apple right to your subscription box, so please consider it. It would be appreciated. We're trying to hit our next milestone of 16,000 subscribers, so join the Saranbyte gang now. Now moving to performance, we have A14 here with 4 gigs of RAM, and that is identical to the iPhone 12 and the iPad Air 4, and surprise, surprise, I've had zero issues. I know the chip in here has been down throttled, but because Apple's chipsets are so good, I really have not picked up on this when it comes to regular usage, and it's perfectly fine for checking on socials, browsing the internet, and watching the occasional movie. You can also push the A14 in here and do some video editing, for example, but let's be honest, most are not doing that with their base iPads. And so for the regular stuff, this works completely fine. And for students wondering how their workflow would be on this, my brother actually uses the iPad 9 for school and he's never had an issue with that. So you should be fine with this as well. He actually doesn't even pick up on the air gap when writing with a pencil. So overall guys, it's good enough for students as well. Another awesome thing about these base iPads are the endurance, because guess what guys? When you get the bare bones experience hardware-wise, there's not a lot that's pushing the internals in here, and so as a result, you easily get upwards of 10 hours of screen on time. Those are pretty insane numbers for a tablet, so if you're a power user guys, you can definitely rely on the iPad 10. Now touching on accessories, this is where I used to have a big issue with the iPad 10, because when it launched it supported the first gen pencil, which honestly wouldn't be an issue if the charging method wasn't so stupid and didn't involve a bloody dongle. Last October, however, Apple did resolve this by launching a new USB-C pencil that, for one, magnetically attaches to the side of the iPad, but also has USB-C charging like the name does suggest. And I know it does have some weird omissions like the lack of pressure sensitivity, but I would buy this over the first gen pencil because of the much better charging methods. The keyboard situation, however, is a bit disappointing. So unlike other iPads that happily support the good old Magic keyboards, this has a special magic keyboard folio, which for one, only comes in white for whatever reason, and white isn't the best material for a keyboard. Made out of a cloth-like material because it's going to get dirty real quick, but of course, on top of this, we have the stupid stand, which I'm not a fan of, and the insane price tag. So yes, ultimately I would go with what Logitech offers instead for less, but I do just wish this had Magic Keyboard support. I know the Folio has a function row which the Magic Keyboard for the Air doesn't, but I still would prefer the floating design. Now quickly touching on the cameras, there's not much for me to say because who actually cares about iPad cameras? Are you that dude at birthday parties with a massive iPad? I hope not. And so when it comes to scanning documents, the rear camera does the job and the front-facing camera being landscape is very nice, and I'm very glad that's now expanding to other iPads. Center stage is pretty awesome too, and it does record 4K video using the rear camera for those who want to record video on this iPad for whatever reason. And it's just fine camera-wise. There's nothing huge for me to complain about, nor does it do anything revolutionary in this aspect. Speakers are a massive upgrade here compared to older base iPads. It's a stereo pair and does make a big difference, and also mics are solid for calls. Now Touch ID is very reliable on this. I actually prefer it to Face ID when it comes to an iPad, because I often block the front-facing camera when holding the Pro models. Wi-Fi speeds have been fine. I was having some issues at launch, but things have stabilized now, and Bluetooth is super reliable for me as well. Finally, I do want to mention that much like iPhone 15, this does have USB-C ports with USB 2 speeds, and I don't care about this. I would be lying to you guys if I said this made a difference in my life because I never transfer anything with my iPad. The port's solely for charging and so it makes no difference to me, but of course, if you're transferring things very often, then you should probably get a higher end iPad. And that's everything, guys. Now obviously the real game changer for the iPad 10 is the recent change in price because, like many of you guys, I also thought this was way too expensive at launch. It was $449 in the US and £499 in the UK, which was a huge price increase over the $329 £319 iPad 9. Thankfully, nearly 2 years later, Apple realized this is supposed to be the base iPad, and so it's now $349 £349. I can now look past most of the shortcomings because it's so much cheaper, and in fact, if you think about it, this does 90% of what the more expensive models can do at, of course, a much lower price. Now, of course, I'm aware the iPad 11 is on its way. It might be launching as soon as September, and so if you can wait, I would suggest waiting for that because it might get a newer chipset and more RAM at the same price, but that's likely it for the changes. So if you're fine with the A14, I can gladly recommend the iPad 10 today. It's definitely the de facto iPad for most consumers. Anyways, let me know your thoughts in the comments. Make sure to like and subscribe for more content like this, and thank you for watching.